Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where we're very pleased to have on the show Judge Jeff Hughes. He's a judge on currently the First Circuit Court of Appeal, but he is in a runoff for the Louisiana Supreme Court. Judge Hughes is going to talk to us about his experience as a private lawyer for 14 years, as a trial court judge for 12 years, as an appellate court judge for 8 years, and why he is running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Judge Jeff Hughes. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show today Judge Jeff Hughes. He is a judge on the First Circuit Court of Appeals. Judge, thank you so much for getting with us. You're running for the Louisiana Supreme Court, the top court in the state of Louisiana. So tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm currently a judge at the First Circuit Court of Appeal, where I've been for 8 years. Prior to that, I was a district court judge for 14 years. Prior to that, I had a private practice for 12 years. So I've been a judge for 22 years.
I think you're 60 years old, is that right?
Just hit 60, yeah.
I feel for you. I know how you feel. You had a crowded field. There was a lot of folks running, both from the First Circuit at the trial court level and a couple of private attorneys, but you've made the runoff. Why do you think you made the runoff?
Well, partly because of that we did have so many candidates, I believe. We had 8 candidates, 6 judges, 5 Republicans, 1 black Democrat, and 2 private attorneys. So it was a pretty diverse and large field, and I think that we all started back several months ago and all campaigned hard, and I was really impressed with the quality of all of the candidates. And we attended several forums where we all had to speak, and I think over time people had to actually focus in and look at the qualifications. There was no easy shorthand way to decide, okay, I'm going to vote Republican or I'm going to vote Democrat. They had to actually look at the candidates and make a decision. And
the district that you are running for the Supreme Court, Supreme Court has 7 justices, and it's divided up, the state is divided up into 7 districts. You're running for District 5, which is over 300,000 registered voters. And so the judges, in fact, the Judge Guidry, who is in the runoff with you, is also on the First Circuit Court of Appeal.
Right.
You guys are friends.
Right. We've been working together at the First Circuit for 8 years now, and also Duke Welch was at the Court of Appeal. Tony Higginbottom has been there a couple of years. And then we had Bill Morvant and Tim Kelly, district court judges that ran. So we all know each other and all have respect for each other.
Well, tell me a little bit more depth about your own individual experience. Take me from high school. What's your education?
Well, I grew up in Denham Springs, went to Denham Springs High.
And I know you were a good student. I mean, not a lot of folks maybe know that, but you were a salutatorian, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah, I was salutatorian of my class and a National Merit Scholar finalist, and got an academic scholarship to LSU, but I also played a lot of ball, played football, baseball, basketball, ran track, high jumped. I had an offer to go to Mississippi Southern, as it was called back then, to play basketball, but both of my parents graduated from LSU. So
I saw that.
Kind of a no-brainer. I was going to LSU.
You had no choice, really, huh?
Right.
And then, as I understand it, not only got your undergraduate degree with honors, but also attended LSU Law School.
Right. Got a history degree from LSU, and then went to LSU Law School, and I was selected for the law review there.
And I'm not sure everybody understands what that means. The top performer in the class.
Yeah, they take, I forget the percentage, but it's the top of the class, and then you write learned articles for the Law Review, which is a publication that they put out, I think, quarterly. And you write a scholarly article with a lot of footnotes, and they the editors, which are the senior students, pick it apart, and it was an educational experience. So I'm glad I got to do it.
And then after that, as I understand it, you went into private practice. You didn't go straight to being a judge or anything like that. You were an attorney for a while.
Yeah, I practiced for 12 years, and I actually was the first attorney in Walker.
Is that right?
I grew up in Denham Springs. There were no attorneys in Walker at that time.
So you strategically opened your office there?
Early 80s, and there was an old saying, you know, if there's one lawyer in town, you're going to starve to death, but if there are two lawyers in town, they'll both do well. Well, despite that old saying, I was the only lawyer in Walker for many years, but we never looked back. Opened the door, and just, you know, from the get-go, we had people coming in needing help. And
Judge, I remember what it's like to do that. You open your door and you're just hoping the phone rings or somebody walks in the door.
Make that payment on that coffee machine the first month, and you're just like, right. Man, it's got it made.
So you did what, a general civil, what they call a general civil practice?
We did everything, Locke. We, I did litigation. I obviously had people who were in car wrecks and that type of thing, but we also did criminal law, a lot of family court law, did juvenile cases. I defended people who were being sued, people like the local hardware store guy. There was an accident, it was like off the premises exactly, and so his insurance company denied coverage, and I had to defend him or he might have lost his business, that kind of thing. So I've seen both sides of the equation.
And so for the folks to understand too, because the law, there's all kinds of different areas of the law, and it sounds like you touched pretty much every area of law when you were practicing as a private attorney.
We did everything I mentioned. We did a lot of real estate. I don't think any of the other candidates in this race, and I don't think my opponent currently ever actually closed a real estate deal. And we did a lot of real estate. I would go out and check title in the courthouse, and that's one of those things where you've got to have the experience to do it to understand how it works.
Right. I got to admit that never was my favorite task. I kind of quit doing that fast. But explain to the folks, when you say you were involved in litigation, that doesn't mean just writing pleadings or paperwork and getting paperwork done. You were literally in the courthouse as a lawyer.
Oh yeah, I tried a lot of cases, picked juries, tried jury trials, both civil and criminal, and I enjoyed going to court. I mean, it was just always interesting, always a learning experience. You just go around and, every case you lose, every little rule day when you lose, you learn something.
That's right.
And over the years, that knowledge adds up.
I've always told my kids that it's not a mistake as long as you learn from it, and this is all a learning process. And so as a private attorney, it sounds like you pretty much had done every aspect of the law, and then all of a sudden you kind of shifted gears and jumped on the other side of the court, so to speak. Yeah,
I never really intended to be a judge. It's not something I was really interested in, but we had a situation where we had a judge in the 21st District who had more or less been appointed by the powers that be without opposition, and he just did not have what many of us considered the proper judicial demeanor. I mean, he would yell and scream and embarrass people in court and that kind of thing, lawyers as well as people. And I just got to the point where I thought I could do better. So I said, what the heck, I'm gonna run, and we won.
And that was how many years ago? Over 20 years ago.
1990.
And then you were on the other side of the court, so to speak, as a judge for 14 years as a trial judge.
Right. And there again, it's a little bit different from the Baton Rouge system, where they have a civil bench, a criminal bench, a family, and a juvenile. In the 21st District, which is Livingston, St. Louis, and Tangipahoa, we actually did everything. So you got to touch all that. Well, we'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. Judge Jeff Hughes running for the First Circuit, on the First Circuit, but running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years
via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and again, very pleased to have on the show Judge Jeff Hughes. He is running for the Louisiana Supreme Court in a runoff for that. And I think the runoff date, Judge, is what, December 8th?
December 8th is the election, and early voting is going to be November 24th, which is a Saturday, through December 1st, which is a Saturday.
All right, well, let's dive right back in. We were talking about, frankly, your experience and why you feel qualified to run for the highest, one of the highest positions in the state of Louisiana on the Supreme Court. Talked about your experience as a private attorney. And then we started talking about your experience as a trial court judge. Tell the folks a little bit more about that.
Well, as I mentioned, as a trial court judge, we had general jurisdiction, which means we tried civil, criminal, family, and juvenile cases.
Everything.
Everything. It was a 3-parish district, so we would rotate a week here, week here, week here. And we would have, usually on Mondays, we would have rules, which was usually about half family court. So I've tried, family court cases pretty much every week for 14 years.
It's a long time.
But then we would have civil trials weeks where we would have nothing but civil trials, and then the next week we would have nothing but criminal trials. So I've tried umpteen civil jury trials and criminal jury trials, as well as the family court and the juvenile. And of course, juvenile court was really the hardest. You get young kids, either they're not being properly cared for, or they're smoking marijuana at age 12, and it's just, that to me was really the toughest thing, to try to keep those young kids in school, in the system, give them hope and guidance, and try to get them on the right path.
Judge, it's interesting because all of those areas, particularly when you're talking about family court, you're dealing with relationships between not only the two spouses, but also if you've got children, you're dealing with the relationships of the parents with the children, child support, how property is going to be divided. It's got all these special nuances of that kind of law. Then you're dealing with criminal matters where someone's freedom is at issue, maybe even life. I mean, did you have to deal with murder trials?
Oh yeah, we did several murder trials. I actually, had a couple of first-degree murder trials. Either fortunately or unfortunately, they ended up with plea bargains where I did not have to impose the death penalty. So even though the death penalty is the law in the state of Louisiana, and that's what I personally would follow, in those 14 years, I never had to actually impose the death penalty.
Okay. And the trial court, I refer to it as like the front lines, so to speak, because you're there, and at times, if it's not a jury trial, you're the judge. I mean, you're the person that listens to the witnesses, and you know the law, and you apply it and all of that. I mean, you're seeing live human beings, and you're deciding whether or not they're telling the truth or not.
Yeah, well, that's the essence of the trial court. It's like you see on TV. You have witnesses, police officers, victims of crime,
experts,
people who are suing each other, expert witnesses, sometimes in front of a jury, sometimes a bench trial, which is just the judge alone making the decision instead of a jury. One of my good friends said going from the district court to the Court of Appeal was like going from a MASH unit to the insane asylum. But the district court is an everyday job. I mean, from the time you step out of your vehicle in the morning, walking into the courthouse, being there all day, there'll still be people there wanting to talk to you when you're trying to go home at night. It's just, I always looked at it, you're kind of like a kindergarten teacher, though. You got to keep the lawyers on schedule and make sure the jury's being fed and that they can communicate with their families and get home at night, and make sure that you're accommodating doctors who are coming to testify, and
right.
Police officers that are there to testify. And it was a very rewarding experience.
Jugging a lot of balls there.
Right.
And really the roles and the tasks that you had were different if it was a jury trial versus a bench trial. I mean, bench trial, you didn't have all the logistics of dealing with 12 folks who are sitting on a jury and all the other nuances that go with the jury trial.
Yeah, and that's, as a judge, I always tried to put the lawyers first. And then when you're doing a jury trial, you always want to put the jurors first.
They're in essence the judge.
Right, and accommodate them, their schedule and their needs.
Well, let's shift gears now, because you did that for 14 years in every aspect of the law that there is. and then you ran for the First Circuit Court of Appeal and won, and have been there for what, 8 years?
8 years.
Okay, tell the folks about that experience. I mean, it's, as you indicated, significantly different than the trial court.
Yes, the First Circuit is actually covers 16 parishes. It's headquartered in Baton Rouge. It's divided into 3 parts: the Florida parishes, East Baton Rouge Parish itself, and the parishes on the other side of the Mississippi River. It goes down to Houma and Thibodeau.
Huge piece of land.
A lot of people and a lot of geography there. We operate basically in 3-man panels, so no one judge makes a decision. It's always at least 3 judges for every decision made. And you do not have trials. You do not have witnesses or police officers or experts or people coming in to testify on the witness stand. You look at the record that is typed up from the trial below.
So you better like to read.
Right. And you read that record, the lawyers file briefs, you circulate opinions between the 3 judges, and then you more or less vote. And the majority controls. There are certain circumstances where we actually go to a 5-man panel, and there are other circumstances where we actually go to all 12 judges to make a decision.
And the reason that happens would be what? Contemplating some pretty big, serious issues.
Yeah, if we're going to overrule a prior First Circuit case, we go en banc, which is all 12. If there's a disagreement between the panel and they're trying to overturn a trial court decision, and we bring in 2 more judges and have a 5-man panel. It's kind of complicated, but I'm a little bit of a skeptic. I was kind of looking for holes to punch in the system when I got there. That's just the way I am, but I'm happy to say that everything has a rational basis and runs. It's a very well run organization, and I credit Chief Judge Burl Carter for that a lot. He's been there a long time.
That's good news, really.
Like I say, if I could find something wrong that I didn't think was fair or working right, I would have brought it up, and I was really pleased to see how the system worked at the First Circuit.
It's interesting, Judge, too, because as you indicated, you're working with at least 2 other judges, and at times it could be 4 or up to 12 total sitting. And that's a whole lot different than being one person at the trial court level deciding this is how it's going to be, and there's nobody there to argue with you. I assume there's a lot of different dynamics that maybe folks don't really understand when you're dealing with multiple people who are rendering a decision.
Right, you've got to respect the opinions of your fellow judges, and I find it very interesting. I just enjoy it. I like learning new things. There's always something new. Everybody's always finding a new loophole, or there are new laws to address. And you've got to, I like to give it my best shot, but you can always learn something from your fellow judges. And I've changed my mind on occasion, and I've changed some minds on occasion. It's all, it's all working together.
So it's a mutual respect for each of the folks that you're sitting with, and then you ultimately come to hopefully a consensus decision, right, which is pretty similar to what the Supreme Court does.
Right, they have 7 justices which cover the entire state, and they each have a separate election district, but once they're elected, they rule on cases that cover the entire state of Louisiana. All
right, well, we'll continue this on the last segment. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. Judge Jeff Hughes running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of myself, Sean Fagan, and Corey Ogeron, and our entire staff for letting us come into your homes for the last 10 years via Legal Lines. We hope that you've come to a greater understanding of how the law works and how the government works for you. So from all of us, thank you. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and again, very pleased to have on the show today Judge Jeff Hughes. He is a judge on the First Circuit Court of Appeal, and he is running for the Louisiana Supreme Court, the top court in the state of Louisiana. Judge, let's just dive right back into it. You discussed your vast experience as a private attorney, 14 years at the trial court level, handling every type of law and every circumstance, and then 8 years on the appellate court at the First Circuit level, and how that's different. And now you're running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. Why?
Well, I guess it's just I enjoy doing my job now. I like learning new things, and I think it would be a new challenge. I've been a judge longer than any of the other candidates, and I just think that I would be good for the job. I believe in the Constitution as a device that protects people from government. And to give you an example, we often hear about the separation of church and state.
Yes, sir.
And the Constitution is to protect churches from the government, not to protect the government from churches. Things like that. I just believe that we need to hold on to our traditional values that made this country great, and this would be an opportunity for me to try to make sure that that happens.
Judge, it's interesting. Folks who have seen the show before, and we've talked about it a lot, that power, all-consuming power, can just destroy a culture and a society, and that's the reason our founders chopped up power of government into the executive or the president or the governor, into the legislature or the Congress, and that's even chopped up twice there because you have a House and a Senate, and then we have the judiciary. And what is your understanding, and what have you applied, what has guided you in exercising the power of the judiciary that you've had both at the trial level and at the appellate court level?
Well, it gets back to the Constitution, and it was designed to limit power. I mean, we went from Britain and King George, who was an absolute monarch,
right,
to our form of government, a republic, and it was designed to prevent that type of abuse from happening. And it's a three-way Mexican standoff between the judiciary, the executive, and the legislative. And I think the judiciary's job is to protect that system, which is designed to protect citizens from government.
So, as I understand the way that the Louisiana Supreme Court works, we have 7 justices. A majority decision is what controls. And so, once again, there has to be the ability for the justices to communicate between themselves and articulate the way you have at the First Circuit. How would you go about doing that?
Well, as I say, I enjoy my job. Just, I would, every case you start with the facts, and the facts are what they are, and then you find the law that applies to those facts. It's just always been my personal philosophy to do the right thing. It's so much easier than trying to figure out, do I want to, please this group or help this side? Just do the right thing. That's the easiest thing to do.
And Judge, for folks to understand, the power that the Louisiana Supreme Court has is almost like a king, so to speak, as it relates to the judiciary, because when it renders a decision on an issue, that then instructs all the 5 appellate courts below it and the 42 trial courts below it how they have to rule when they see that issue come before them. It's called precedent. So the power of the Supreme Court is huge, and so in essence, it's supposed to interpret the laws that the legislature passes, but that interpretation can sometimes, people would call it legislating from the bench. They're taking on a role that really is supposed to be reserved for elected officials in the legislature. Explain how you would deal with that.
Well, I'll take the opposite approach. I think that the court should never legislate from the bench. The legislature makes the law, and we should only interpret it. And when judges start trying to create law, that's a problem. My philosophy is the opposite of that. You're not going to see me being in favor of any, new rules or new laws that are created by the court. I think we have to just let the legislature do its job, and we should do our job in as narrow and swift and as efficient a manner as we can.
Judge, at least in my impression is that our country is divided on a national level, and it seems like in certain sectors of society we're just divided. We're chopped up into so many ways, and it appears that our Louisiana Supreme Court is kind of divided between, I think, we have 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans?
3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 1 independent. But if I can be the first Republican elected from this Supreme Court district, it will give the Supreme Court a Republican majority.
So what does that really look like then? What does that mean? How would that change things?
I don't think it would change that much. I think regardless of whether you're a Republican or Democrat, you should follow the law. But I think it does set a tone as far as philosophy. My campaign has been traditional values. I'm pro-life. I believe strongly in the Second Amendment. I believe in traditional marriage. And those are the conservative values that I've let known that that's what I believe in. And this race is going to be a little different from the first primary because we had 8 candidates there. We're now down to 2. But I think in the second primary, which is December the 8th, the general election, December 8th, experience will be the main factor.
And so I presume since you're in the runoff and you want the position, you believe that you're more qualified because of your experience or what, to hold the position?
Well, as we mentioned, I was a district court judge for 14 years, so I've tried every kind of case. My opponent went straight from the legislature to the Court of Appeal, so he's never tried a murder trial. He's never tried a jury trial. He's has no trial experience. And I think those are things that you don't have that experience if you've never done them.
One other of the roles that the Louisiana Supreme Court plays is not only to render decisions on legal issues that come before it, but also on an administrative side. There are over 300 judges and thousands of employees. Are there any things that you know of, Judge, that you think could make the system more accessible and more efficient economically?
Well, I would like to see more just access to normal people. There's a perception, I guess, that that only the rich and powerful are able to access the Supreme Court.
That's kind of where I was going with it. What are your views on, for example, videoing or having cameras tape or participate in certain decisions that the court's making or arguments are making, so that the public can see the system work? Because I'm fearful when that doesn't happen.
Well, I'm a little leery about that, though, and I go back. It has to be done in the right way, and maybe a delayed presentation might work. Or I think they do actually have online now the arguments at the Supreme Court. But you have to be very careful. After like the O.J. case and the Casey Anthony case in Florida, that just turned into a circus. It was on TV every day, and you just have to be very careful to guard against that. And
so the integrity of the process is most important, because if people don't have trust in the judiciary, then we got some problems.
Right, and I say access. You need to let people know, even if people lose their case, if they know that they had their day in court and they were heard and that their arguments were considered,
then they have a good judiciary.
Well, they retain faith. Even if they lose, they'll retain faith in the system.
Judge, thank you so much. Very much appreciate you coming on. This is Locke Meredith with Legal Lines. Judge Jeff Hughes, running for the Louisiana Supreme Court. Thank you for being with us today.